Hey, this is Clark with Pass the Baton, where we believe ministry is a relay, not a marathon. And in this series, we've been talking about church discipline. Kind of started with what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 18, then went to Paul in 1 Corinthians, basically chapter 5, and then finished up in his second letter, which he kind of addresses, I believe, the same instance where he was talking about discipline in 1 Corinthians. Today, in this video, I want to talk more about a practical aspect of church discipline. And in doing this, I'm kind of taking what Paul says here, but I'm using an analogy that I feel like I know a little bit about from my job in the operating room over the last 20 plus years. But in the letter that Paul's writing to the church, his first letter that we have, 1 Corinthians, which is the one we started with in the last video, referring to Paul and church discipline. And in the same letter, when Paul gets later on in the chapter 12, he starts referring to the gifts. Obviously, there's a question with this church in Corinth about the gifts and whose is more important and who does what. And so he starts to address that, and he refers to the church as a body. Now, in doing this, he's referring to each member having their own place, talking about if the eye, if they think they don't see, then where's the hearing, or on and on and on. You talk about these different parts of the body, the eye, the ear, the extremities, everything has a part. And literally, as he gets into this letter in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, he says, "And those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, upon these we bestow more abundant honor. And on the ones," and I'm paraphrasing here, "but on the ones that don't look good," basically we make them look good in a sense. Our uncomely parts become the comely ones. That's King James language there, but he says that there should be no division in the body, that members should have the same care one for another. And then he goes on to say, if one member, and that means you could look at it as your hands, your feet, your legs, if one member suffered, then all the members suffer with it. And if one rejoiced, then all rejoice with it. So I'd like to look at that as an analogy quickly here as we look at church discipline. And so here's the thing. If we look at the church as the body, and each person has a part in that body. Christ is the head, as he refers to. Literally, Paul refers to that in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, the chapter right before this one. And so Jesus is the head, and we all have a part in that body. So considering that analogy, is there ever a time when a body part is removed? Now, from working in the operating room, I could say absolutely yes. There is a time when a body part is removed. Now, for the sake of the video, I'm just going to refer to extremities. Like if you have a lower leg amputation or a upper, you can be above the knee, below the knee. Sometimes you just do a foot or part of a foot. And it's a thing I don't like to help with, but it's a necessity at times in the operating room. It seems to be kind of a morbid thing when you're literally removing someone's extremity. So there is a time to do it. So let's say that someone has a problem. They notice that their foot's infected. It's not getting better. Maybe the toes are starting to turn black. So they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, this is what you need to do. This is the first step. So having said that, if a doctor says you need to change your diet, you know what? Your ears are going to hear what he's saying, and the ears are going to try to do, more than likely. Now, there are exceptions, but more than likely, most people are going to be like, they hear it, and they say, okay, I want to try to change my diet. I'm not going to eat as much sugar. I'm going to try to avoid those things so that my foot will get better. The eyes see the wound on the leg, and they may use their hands to go and change the dressing. They may use their feet to walk somewhere where they need to get the supplies that they need to do. So all parts of the body come together to try to heal that part that is suffering. And that is what the church is supposed to do. When one member suffers, all of us suffer. So if someone is doing something wrong in the church, as far as the analogy goes, let's say that there's some gross sexual misconduct or something, then the church, not just the pastor, but the church should rally around this person, try to understand what they can do to help fix this problem. Now listen, it's not easy. It's not easy for a pastor. It's not easy for anyone. But there's a time when that may need to happen. And that is how the body works. Each part of the body will go to try to correct the problem that is going on, because no one wants to lose a part of their body. An extremity that is lost is a big deal. And there's people that understand that a whole lot better than I do. So we say that the body would all come together to do it. So yes, there is a time when a body part may need to be removed, as well as in the church. There's a time, but when does that happen? Well, I could say this, that anybody I've ever talked to that's had to go through an amputation, they don't want it to happen, and it is a last resort. It's the last thing you want to do, and that's how Jesus implied it. If you have a problem with someone, you go to them, and then if they don't listen, then you take a couple witnesses, and they don't listen, you bring it before the church, which I believe means that the church would come to them and try to help them. It's not that they get in front of the church, but the church would come together. They try to help this person because we're all body. We're related. It should be something that we try to fix. So when in a body, when it happens, the number one reason why someone may need to have an extremity removed is, honestly, when you look at it in depth, is it's a lack of circulation. It's blood flow. So the number one problem with people losing an extremity is that, and it's the same with the church. If it's a problem that the church feels like they need to discipline someone or remove someone, it needs to be an extremely important thing. I look at blood as a salvation issue. It's something that literally is black and white, scriptural, something that we need to be able to point out and say, this is a problem. But first you need to try to fix it. There's other things. Sometimes it may be a tumor, which is rare. A lot of times you would just remove the tumor. Sometimes it's an accident. In wartime, you see people have crushed an extremity. It may need to be removed, or one may be a congenital, maybe a birth defect type of thing. But the only reason why you would remove a birth defect is if it's causing more problems than it is good. That's pretty. I don't want to say the only, but that's the majority of the reason. So let's say it's a blood flow problem. You don't automatically, or at least necessarily, you don't automatically go and remove that body part. Sometimes, if it's possible, you want to restore blood flow to that extremity. I mean, you may get a vascular surgeon go. Maybe it's some fatty stuff in your arteries, and they want to go in there and try to clean it out. They may put a stent in there, maybe in your from your aorta into bifemorals down towards your legs. It may be something they can open up there. Sometimes you may just go and remove some dead tissue. And literally, if you're removing dead tissue from a body part, what you want to do, and I learned this years and years ago, you want to restore blood flow. A good thing you want to see as you're removing dead tissue is blood coming. You want to remove far enough down that you see blood flow, because the blood is what will restore it. But you want to do everything you can to help that extremity so that it does not need to be removed. No one wants to go through that. No one wants to have something amputated, and a church should never want or desire something to be removed. What we should desire is for the problem to be fixed. And if it's my leg, if it's my arm, I want people around me to do everything they can to fix the problem so I do not have to live my life without it. And that is how the church should be. When we see a problem going on, when we see something that we feel like needs to be disciplined, we should try to help that problem. I realize there's different opinions on how to help that, but from the analogy standpoint, there are things that we can do, and sometimes you may have to get someone who understands how that particular problem works to talk to them. I mean, that it may go that far. It may be something like that. Now, once something has been removed, no, this is kind of the last point, but think of this. When something's removed, sometimes people have phantom pain. I mean, listen, life, they will always have they'll always miss it. And every single time that this happens, it changes the person's life. For the rest of their life, it will change. And I have never talked to anyone who's lost an extremity that would not love to have it back, that would not love to have it fixed. Now, as a church, if that's been removed and they repent, we're supposed to take them back. We're supposed to allow that to happen. Now, with an extremity, you may have a prosthesis that will work for you. You may be able to do something. Now, physically, they're not going to be able to grow another leg, at least at this point in science, to attach it to you. But we do have ways around that can help that person. And anybody I've ever talked to would want that to happen. But not only does it affect the person that's lost the extremity, it affects everyone around them. It affects their family. I mean, the family may have to come to their aid for the rest of their life in order to help them, depending on the extent of the extremity that's lost. And even yet, there's a sense to that. When someone's removed, we should still try to help them. We should still go to them, even if they've been removed. And so, listen, church discipline is not as easy as a topic as it may seem sometimes. But we should, as a church, as a body of believers, do everything we can to help that extremity, that body part, to receive what it needs so that it can stay on the body, because we're going to hurt when it's gone. They're going to suffer when it's gone. But when one suffers, we should suffer with them. And it should always be a last resort. Although, yes, sometimes it's necessary. Yes, there's times I can even as a nurse look at it and say, yeah, that needs to be removed. There's nothing we can do for that. But listen, there's a little more to it than just saying, okay, we just need to get rid of that. It's never, ever that easy, and it shouldn't be. For a child of God, we should want to see the things in that body part be fixed. This is Clark, and I hope that you, just like what I'm trying to encourage, I hope that you want to help pass the baton instead of just running a marathon by yourself, because it gets extremely lonely by yourself. So until next time.